Charging. It's the area of electric car ownership that gets a lot of discussion. So today I'm in Westminster to go for a drive with the woman who's got her finger on the pulse when it comes to what the future of charging looks like.
Hello, Minister. Come on in. Let's go for a drive. I've brought the greenest car I could find.
I noticed. So tell me, what are we in?
We're in a Vauxhall Mocha.
Yeah.
So British brand, very popular electric car. You'll be happy to know it falls within the government grant criteria.
My next vehicle will be a zero emission vehicle, and we keep looking and there's a bit to think about. It's a little bit complicated. You know, it's not the charging infrastructure that I actually worry about at the moment. It's having 7 seats. I think not being able to transport all my children around is just not a step I'm willing to take at the moment, despite them all being young adults. But I am committed and enthusiastic that my next car will be a zero emission vehicle. I just don't know which one yet. What do you think?
Well, we can help you with that.
Good.
You can come and test some vehicles for us.
Oh, that is one of the joys of this job.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there, because we're asking consumers to make a really big switch, aren't we? And it's not right for everybody at the moment. And you will have no doubt your reasons why making that switch hasn't been quite right for you yet. So, of course, the announcements that we've seen today from the government, it's going to really, hopefully, help people make that transition. So one of the big announcements, Trudy, is a huge supersizing of infrastructure, isn't it?
It is. We've got 29,500 public charge points on our network at the moment, which is about 3,500 more than there was when I started in this job. We see about 600 a month. And of those, 5,400 are rapid. We know that a lot of people charge at home, and that will continue to be the easiest, most convenient and cheapest way for an awful lot of motorists. But we do want to be able to say that no driveway is no problem.
But we know that the existing infrastructure can be very hit and miss. Reliability isn't always at what it should be.
We're getting that sorted.
Okay, so how's that going to be sorted to make sure that all these chargers work for people?
We are bringing in regulations to provide confidence to people that when they find out where that charging infrastructure is, where that charge point is, they can be confident it'll bloomin' work.
Okay.
Because you can have all these charge points, but if they're not reliable, they're as much use as chocolate fire guards. So making sure that we've got a reliable network is so important. There'll be certainly penalties if charge points don't work. There will be consequences for the owners of those charge points, and then providing the transparency so people know how much they need to pay, and then when they pay they don't need to download yet another app. It'll be done by contactless.
Let's just come back to that charging thing a minute, because I plugged this in last night and off peak.
Go on, tell me how it works for you.
Off peak, you'll be happy to hear on my EV tariff through my energy supplier, and I can charge up, and it will cost me about a couple of pence per mile. Now, if I'm using the public network, it's multiples of that, many multiples, because it's so much more expensive. And then there's also the question of VAT. So at home, it's 5% VAT on my home energy, 20% VAT on energy and across the public network. Does it seem fair to you that those of us that don't have driveways are paying more for the energy?
Clearly, no, it doesn't. I mean, I'm not going to beat about the bush on this. Matters of taxation are certainly a matter for the Chancellor. So working cross-government, the VAT issue is certainly a conversation I have multiple times.
Okay. And also the cost of charging as well. How do we get that more, I guess, regulated? Because it can vary wildly.
No, it's more about consumers being able to have the choice. And it comes back to having the choice of chargers. I know in London, it's many more times than it is in my home county of Cumbria. But when we've got these standards in place, people can look to find out where the charger is, and they'll know how much they're going to be paying. So they've got a choice. So we're working with some of the large car and charge point infrastructure people to persuade them to make some of their charging infrastructure available for others as well.
Okay, would that be Tesla?
It would.
So you're putting pressure on Tesla to open the network?
It's not really much pressure needed. They absolutely
Okay.
recognise that. You know, Tesla have been absolutely brilliant at working with us, and they recognise that they are absolutely part of the solution here.
And when do you think that might happen? Because that would be really welcome news for a lot of people.
Can't give exact dates, but the pressure is on, and it is weeks and months rather than years.
There's got to be a bit of a levelling up when it comes to charging infrastructure, because, you know, we've got the situation where there's 8 square miles of Westminster that we're driving around, and there's more charging points here than there are in Cumbria, in your hometown,
Yeah.
in my hometown of Greater Manchester. So that's not right, is it? How do you make sure that the chargers get spread right across the country?
Well, it is certainly not for the lack of ambition from government or money from Treasury and my department. We've identified that some local authorities are doing a sterling job and others are really struggling. I used to work for a local council, but it's hard work. They've got so many pulls on the time, few resources, which is why our emphasis is in bolstering those resources.
Okay.
Tell me about your Auntie D.
So I think my Auntie D is like a typical consumer, really. You know, she's the perfect person that should be driving an EV.
Yeah.
Because she does small local journeys. In the long term, when, you know, you take into account the total cost of ownership, it would save her a lot of money. But she's got reservations. She's a bit scared about making the switch. She doesn't know about if chargers are reliable. You know, if she can, you know, she'll be able to do it because it's new technology. We're asking people to get their head around, and it's also just changing habits. So she's got those concerns, and I guess it's how you as a government talk to people like Auntie D and reassure her that it's going to be okay if she makes that switch.
Yeah, my mum's similar. In fact, I don't think my mum has ever put petrol or diesel into her cars.
Yeah.
It was always the job that my dad would do, and then when my dad passed away, my brother has the job of fueling her car up. She's just worried about getting petrol and diesel all
Yeah.
over the forecourt. I remember that when I was first starting out. So actually, an electric connection, you know, plugging in a vehicle is far less concerning, I think. So I think if it works for my mum, it can work for your Auntie D. We maybe need to get them together. And the other kind of cohort of people I talk to who are sceptical about electric vehicles is probably a bit like myself, actually, because I still have a manual car. I enjoy driving. I love driving. We've got brilliant roads in Cumbria for driving on. But having now tried a number of electric vehicles, I am converted to their acceleration, the performance, the smoothness, just the responsiveness that you get from an electric motor. I mean, we've talked about Tesla. I think their Roadster is about 1.9 seconds, 0 to 60.
You do know your
Good on
cars,
this
Minister.
I love my cars. Absolutely love my cars.
And there's a big piece of work needs doing, isn't there, around infrastructure and getting the energy to all these, in particular the rapid charging points that you were talking about.
Yep.
You know, if you look at the motorway services, I mean, there's a beautiful motorway services in Cumbria that T-Bay
My
services,
favourite.
the joy,
Yeah,
that, I mean, the
it
best
is.
motorway service station in the world. But a lot of them, it's old 60s and 70s infrastructure. How are you going to, you know, whose responsibility is it to make sure that there's enough power in there
Yeah.
to get to the banks of rapid chargers that we need?
Well, that's working with another colleague in government, Greg Hands, who's the Minister for Energy, and Ofgem. Because part of this is the transitional nature. We need the cables in, you know, from the pylons to the substation, trenching to the motorway service area. We need the cables in now, but we won't necessarily need all of that power now, because at the moment it's predominantly cars, but we know in the future it's going to be heavy goods vehicles. So we're going to have to future-proof the infrastructure that we trench for today. We don't want to dig twice or 3 times because that's expensive and daft. I think we've got it really well thought out now.
Okay.
I think it is absolutely the priority for 2022 to put the flesh on the bones and work with our partners. And most importantly, persuade consumers that this transition is for them. And I think the work that you do, Ginny, is just fantastic in that regard.
Oh, thank you.
You know, you mentioned you're from Rochdale, northern women talking about cars. What's not to like?
What's not to like? Absolutely.
We'll continue to see the love of motoring, and I think we'll see a much more vibrant UK car manufacturing base as well. We are a nation of innovation, of pioneers, of smart machine makers, risk takers. My dad was an engineer, and he would be so excited, I think, now to see the revelation that's happening in the transport system.
On that note, Minister, I am going to find a spot to drop you off and let you get back.
You've been very good, Ginny. Thank you.
Very
It's
nice
been a
to
lot
meet
of fun.
you. We'll do it again. I'll bring a different
Absolutely.
car next
That
time.
would be good, yeah.
Okay.
Can you find a 7-seater?
I'll bring you a 7-seater next time.
Perfect.
Bye.
As always, thanks for watching, and do let us know what you think in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you know when our next review has landed.